Hello and welcome to Young Turks, India's longest running show on startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Shruti Mishra. Now moving on and starting with the top story of this week. TikTok CEO Kevin Mayer has decided to step down barely 3 months after taking charge of the post, as first reported by CNBC. Now, Mayer will be replaced by US General Manager Vanessa Pappas on an interim basis. I quote, "In recent weeks, as the political environment has sharply changed, I have done significant reflection on what the corporate structural changes will require and what it means for the global role I signed up for. Against this backdrop, and as we expect to reach a resolution very soon, it is with a heavy heart that I wanted to let you all know that I have decided to leave the company," end quote. Mayer said in a letter to employees, the development comes even as the Trump administration is forcing the company to sell its US arm, citing a threat to national security. As per earlier reports, Microsoft and Oracle are already in talks to buy the business from ByteDance, TikTok's parent company. Now, ByteDance's founder and CEO Shang Yiming said in a separate letter that the company was, and in quotes, moving quickly to find resolutions to the issues that we face globally, particularly in the US and India. He said Mayer had joined the firm just as it was entering arguably a most challenging moment. TikTok was among the 59 Chinese apps that the Indian government banned in June, citing security and privacy concerns. The Information Technology Ministry said that the decision was taken, and I quote, "In view of the information available, they are engaged in activities which are prejudicial to sovereignty and integrity of India, defense of India, security of state and public order." Now moving on to a sector that has been in the headlines lately, the EdTech sector. Now, the education market in India is worth $135 billion as per data from Bloom Ventures. But the size of the EdTech sector in India's education market is not even $1 billion yet. It is, however, estimated to touch $4 billion by 2025. The EdTech sector continues to keep the cash registers ringing as investors are writing bold checks for companies in the space that has turned lockdowns into opportunities. This segment's poster boy, Byju's, has raised more funding with 909 crore rupees coming in from DST Global, the investment firm led by Russian billionaire Yuri Milner. The company had recently raised funding from Silicon Valley investor Mary Meeker's fund, Bond Capital, which valued the company at over $10 billion. Now, before that, Byju's had already raised nearly $500 million at the beginning of the year from Tiger Global and General Atlantic. Apart from Byju's, players such as Unacademy, Vedantu, Eruditus, Topper, ClassPlus and Simplilearn have all emerged as breakthrough companies. Now, to talk about the road ahead for the sector, joining me now are Sajid Pai, Director, Bloom Ventures, and Mukul Rustagi, Co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of ClassPlus. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining us on Young Turks today. Now, Sajid, let me start with you. The EdTech space has become quite overcrowded, especially with the pandemic forcing institutions to explore online teaching options. It has accelerated the growth of EdTech companies in India. Now, with Byju's, Vedantu, Unacademy leading the pack, is there a big enough market for all to get a fair deal? Who will survive?
Yeah, it's a great question, Shruti. So I think the best way to answer would be that yes, those three that you mentioned, and Byju's, Unacademy, Vedantu, are certainly deeply funded, are getting funded, and they're beginning to pull away from the pack. But that said, they only operate in one segment of EdTech, and that is what is test prep, to an extent tuition. Increasingly, EdTech is not just one, it's multiple things. There is Upgrad. Upgrad competes in an entirely different sector. The ClassPlus, for example, is slightly different. It's B2B SaaS. So what I would say is, yes, those three are doing well, and they will get more funding down the line, and they will go into global giants. At the same time, there are a lot of opportunities for players such as Upgrad, Simplilearn, ClassPlus, Eruditus, all of them to do well. And multiple sectors are beginning to emerge. White Hat itself came out of nowhere, you know. And so I would say that, yes, orthogonal approaches are needed. It's not easy today to take on a Byju, Unacademy, or a Vedantu. The movie, that's my term for them. They're like the fang of EdTech. They're well funded, they're getting into everything. But orthogonal approach, like what Class Plus has employed, or something like White Hat, where you created an entirely new market, or you serve a very different kind of customer
Yeah.
after, yeah. So those approaches could work.
Okay.
So that's how I would put it here.
All right, so let's talk to one of your investee company, Class Plus. Mukul, coming to you now. There's a lot of competition in this space, and everyone seems to be giving similar offerings. How at Class Plus are you doing things differently?
Hi, thank you, Shruti. Thanks for having us on the call. I think we're slightly differently positioned than all the companies that you would mention coming into this space and offering similar solutions. Like one of the stark differences that we do not lead the entire offering to the end consumers, which is the students, which predominantly most of the players in the edtech do it by themselves.
Okay.
We don't intervene into that. So our essential business model and our product offering is to empower these local hyperlocal neighborhood coaching centers or individual teachers who want to move online in a world where offline is not enough for them to give out their complete offerings.
Yeah.
And then we enable and empower them to give out their offerings to their end customers, which are the students, in their own manner. So essentially, we don't own the pedagogy. We are essentially a tech stack which powers the backend of all these centers, whereas a lot of what predominantly you might have meant by similar offerings would be the pedagogical offerings.
Correct, yeah.
Or content offerings that most of the companies do. So I think we're slightly differently positioned over there, where we are not directly trying to exchange communication with the end user.
Okay, Sajid, coming back to you, what are the new trends you're seeing in the edtech space? For instance, while K-12 and test prep have been the focus areas, we're seeing a lot of interest in the upskilling and reskilling segments. Your view on this?
Yeah. So upskilling is certainly done well. Upgrade's been one of the big winners. Not to mention there aren't others. There are many others.
Yeah.
Increasingly, anything digital, anything which, and we're living through, it's typically a VUCA world, right? And your company is not going to invest in you. So certainly one trend we have seen is in a world of uncertainty where your company is not investing in you, you want to take more control of your career. So that's where an Upgrade or a Simply Learn, Great Learning, Edureka, they've all come in to kind of fill that need. So that's been one trend, and that's what's driven upskilling, really. So I would say that you can segment the education market from age-wise. And if you look at this whole college to jobs and the first few years of corporate, what's called career starters, career accelerators, that's where upskilling really plays a big role. Getting you that first job and then helping you do well in that first job. But that apart, there have been other sectors also which have come out of the blue. So this whole non-curricular learning, which historically didn't exist in India, right? So people like us are beginning to spend on, classes for our kids, music classes, coding classes.
Yeah, extracurricular activities, yeah.
Absolutely. That's been one big trend that's come out of the blue. A lot of online classes, a lot of seasoned entrepreneurs getting into that. The other one is being interesting B2B approaches, which have kind of come out. And we're beginning to see a lot of B2B SaaS companies come in EdTech as well, trying to solve problems. So there's Class Plus, for example, but they're not the only one. Exceed has done well.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful startup in Bombay called Lead Education, which has kind of come out of the blue, and Lead School, which has come and which supports schools in curriculum development, etc. So there's a lot of interesting B2B stories also emerging, not just the B2C ones. So these are the three broad trends, I would say. Yeah.
All right.
Upskilling. Yeah.
Yeah, so how Sajid was talking, Mukul, about the upskilling and reskilling market. Is Class Plus looking at this space as well anytime soon?
Essentially, whenever somebody asks us that question about XYZ and whether we are targeting that, it's not directly in our hands because, as I say, we are the tools and the toolkit of any teacher out there trying to serve their students. So essentially, as a platform, we are used by teachers across the spectrum. You would have teachers right from K-12 to probably test prep to vocational training to language training. And recently, we have even seen teachers who are doing extracurrics. And they're essentially, the platform has been fortunately designed in such a way that it's agnostic of what you teach. Like predominantly, even if I wanted to have one coding session with my 5 students, I can predominantly use the platform. So essentially, it's never in our hands on how do we really, on what kind of markets or what kind of students do we really want to serve. Our goal is very simple. We essentially serve the educators of the country, and educators have the best idea on the kinds of audiences and the kinds of needs those audiences have when they decide to serve them.
Yeah, but would you be open to that?
In that manner. But yes, we have definitely seen a uptrend in teachers and educators trying to serve different segments than before. And obviously, skill training is one of them.
All right. Okay. So you're open to the idea. Sajid, we were talking about trends, and interestingly, we're seeing that the Indian consumer is happy to pay for online courses. Is EdTech the new e-commerce?
Yeah, so that's certainly a catchline I've heard, and you're absolutely right. Okay. So one way is to see EdTech as the e-commerce, and because like just the way e-commerce transformed China, in India, of course, e-commerce has, of course, consumer base, but it's not been as large as China. But EdTech clearly is the one where people could spend, and we believe that if anything, EdTech is going to see greater growth than e-commerce even.
Okay.
One good way to see it is also as it's got the margins of SaaS. It's got 90-100% because it's purely digital margins, right? And people are willing to pay for it. In fact, there is even a slight premium. People may say that, oh, it's a little more premiumly priced, but the quality must be good. So EdTech benefits from all of these advantages. And I certainly kind of concur with that observation that EdTech is India's, e-commerce. Okay. Or rather, e-commerce was China, EdTech is to India. And that the Amazon of India, as Gaurav Munjal, one of our great entrepreneurs puts it, an Academy founder puts it, India's Amazon will be an EdTech company, not necessarily an e-commerce company. So, yeah, so I would completely agree with you there.
All right, Sajid, one more question. Besides bumper growth, 2020 has been proven to be a stellar year for EdTech companies in terms of fundraising and valuation. Now, while cash registers have been ringing, EdTech companies need to focus on unit economics and growth. Sajid, what business models will really work?
Yeah, so in EdTech, I think fortunately, people have been willing to pay. And there has been a clear kind of ability to charge the consumer.
Yeah.
But there are differing models. There are premium models. So like would say White Hat or Upgrad would be more in the premium category. Whereas An Academy and all would come in the middle. And then there are players like Pariksha, etc., or Prep Insta, for example, who serve a slightly different demographic. So, but in all cases, Shruti, I would say finally the consumer will pay. There could be a model whereby you'll get the business to pay, and then the consumer benefits from it. Say like a college. The college pays for a particular software and the students enjoy it, or college pays for certain content to enjoy it. But the predominant business model will be when the user pays for it.
Okay.
But that said, you're absolutely right. I think the acquisition costs, fortunately, thanks to COVID, have come down. But retention is something that they need to worry about. Will they hold on to all of these customers? So that's certainly something that they need to look into. Yes, they will lose some customers, but not all of them. And this will become the new normal.
Okay. Yeah. Sajid, one final question, and quickly, if you could answer that. Byju's, $300 million acquisition of White Hat Junior is a milestone in India's EdTech space. Are we seeing the first wave of EdTech startups going global?
Yeah, so that's an astute point, Shruti. In fact, I would say that I am beginning to see a lot of pitches, and I'm sure some of my counterparts are also seeing, where the founders are saying, look, we're actually building a global product. It also helped. For example, 60% of White Hat's revenue in the last month before they got acquired was coming from the US.
Yeah.
Indian parents, but they were also going to get some non-Indians using it. This is all being served out of India. So so White Hat would be the first example. There have been examples before, like for example, Buta Vista. But White Hat is really the big shining success story.
Sure.
And I think we will see more and more such players emerge, building great consumer brands built out of, say, Indiranagar or Bellandur or Gurgaon or Bandra, but for the Bay Area. So we are going to see more of that.
All right.
Because India is really, if you look at it, affluent India, all of us English-speaking Indians, we're about 30-35 million people. We speak fluent English, we use English products.
Yeah, so on that positive note, I'd like to thank the both of you for joining us today on Young Turks. We had to take a quick short break, but when we return, we focus on where the investments have picked up for Indian startups. We turn our focus to what role can a domestic investor play in times today. Thank you so much. We'll be right back.